everyone. Welcome to the Bountiful Garden. I'm Sandra Grenzi, Family and Community Health Sciences Educator for Rutgers Cooperative Extension. And I'm here today to talk to you about dehydrating tomatoes. But before we get into the actual process of dehydrating tomatoes, I want to talk a little bit about how the process works as a way to preserve food. So dehydrating is a very ancient process. It's been used as a way to preserve food for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And the reason why it works to make food safe for long-term storage is that it removes the water that is in foods. In particular, today we'll be talking about vegetables. But water is necessary for bacteria, molds, and microorganisms to grow. So if we remove the water, there's less of a chance that those harmful organisms will grow. So that's one thing that dehydrating does. It also slows down the action of naturally occurring enzymes that are in foods. So in beautiful fruits and vegetables, enzymes work to help ripen fruits and vegetables. They're responsible for beautiful color changes, but also for decomposition of fruits and vegetables. So we don't want that to happen in our preserved foods. So dehydrating will slow that down. It won't completely stop it, but it will slow it down. And as a bonus, one I think the best benefits of dehydrating is that we start with a large volume of food and can reduce it down really to something very small. So it really is a great space-saving method. Now, the optimal temperature for dehydrating, it's not very high. It's about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. If we try to dehydrate at a higher temperature, we can run the risk of creating sort of like a hard barrier or shell on the outside of our food, and then it will be hard to dry the inside. So 140, that's a relatively low temperature. That's ideal for dehydrating. And that is usually achievable with our electric dehydrators that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. One of the common questions I get is about sun drying in New Jersey. Can we sun dry in New Jersey? And the answer is, unfortunately, not very successfully, if at all. And there's good reason for that. First of all, to have effective sun drying, you need a good steady temperature of 85 degrees Fahrenheit or greater. And now we have no problem with that in the summer in New Jersey. However, another requirement is to have relative humidity less than 60%. Now, I don't know about you, but this summer in New Jersey has felt really humid and hot to me. And in fact, the relative humidity for New Jersey summers ranges from probably about 60 all the way up into 90%. You know those days where we're just dripping with sweat. So the weather conditions in the summer when we have our bounty of beautiful fruits and vegetables to harvest, the weather conditions don't necessarily cooperate with us. And the other thing we have in New Jersey is frequent thunderstorms during July and August and into September. So if we're putting trays outside, having the risk of a storm just wouldn't work. So unfortunately, sun drying in New Jersey is not very feasible, but we have that weather is one of the things that allows us to be the garden state and to have a bounty of fruits and vegetables to harvest. So we can't sun dry. What about oven drying? Now that's a possibility if you have the right equipment. So in an oven, again, we have to achieve a very low setting, no more than 140 degrees. Now, not every oven is able to be turned on to reach a low temperature like that. So an individual oven, you would have to look and see, can you even set your oven to a temperature that low and maintain it for hours, possibly, maybe even up to a day. And the other important thing to consider is airflow. Now, if you have a convection feature in your oven, that's a fan, so that will circulate air. But if you don't, then you may need to leave your oven door cracked open to circulate some air. And unfortunately, summers in New Jersey, having an oven on with the door cracked open, even at a temperature as low as 140, that's not too desirable. And the other thing too is it's going to monopolize your oven for as long as you're dehydrating. But it is a possibility if you can meet those conditions. It will take longer compared to using an electric dehydrator. Now, let's talk about electric dehydrators. Well, they come in many different styles, price ranges, space requirements. They have various features such as variable temperature setting. Some have a timer. So there are many characteristics that you can research if you're seriously interested in doing a lot of dehydrating. One of the most important ones for me was space. I don't have a large kitchen with a lot of counter space, so I went with something just very small, reasonably priced. I have 3 temperature settings. I have a just fan only with no heat. Now, the downside, I'm going to turn mine on for a minute. You're going to hear it does have a pretty considerable hum. So think about having that, think of a space where you could have that on, for 12 to 24 hours or more if you're doing multiple batches. And just noise could be an issue. So make sure you listen to the model that you are considering buying. So I'll shut that off for now. And they come with other features like this is a tray that you could make a fruit leather. So it's a flexible plastic tray. You just fill your puree in there and then slip it on top of one of the trays. So you can, mine came with 1. You might be able to buy more depending on your unit. But bottom line, there is some versatility with some extras. Okay, so that's the dehydrator, the electric dehydrator. Let's talk about tomatoes. Now, tomatoes are great in that to dehydrate them, we don't need necessarily to blanch them or remove their seeds and skin. So it's pretty easy. But you want to start with, just like with any home food preservation, the quality of the product going in equals the quality of the product going out. So you want to start with good quality, fresh off the vine if you're growing them, or fresh from the market if you're buying them, tomatoes. Free of blemishes, free of bruises. You don't want any mold on there. So variety does matter, or type of tomato does matter. Small plums, or small garden mini plums, salad types, I think they call them now. They're meaty, firm. They have quite a bit of pulp compared to water. So that's the kind of a tomato that does best in the dehydrator. Because if we were to put a ginormous, delicious slicing tomato that's just so full of juice, if we tried to dehydrate that, number one, it would take hours and hours and hours because of so much water content. And there wouldn't be very much pulp left. So small plums, meaty salad types, they work really great. So I have this is a San Marzano type plum, and again, this beautiful heirloom blush tomato that I have. That's what I use to dehydrate the batch that I made to show you today, and I'll slice these up in a minute to show you how. So what else? So uniform slices, 1/4 to 3/8 inch thick. The more uniform, the better, because if you're filling multiple trays, you're going to be checking them during the course of the dehydrating, and you really do want them to dry evenly. So even slices is important, even spacing, at least a 1/2 inch of space between each slice so the air can flow. all across the surface of the slice. I don't usually season mine, but you can. You can sprinkle your slices with dried herbs, but bear in mind you will get some onto the tray, so you may have a little bit of cleanup. But if you have a recipe in mind and you feel like seasoning them up a bit, you can do that also. Okay, so let me, at this point, just slice up a couple and I'll put them on the tray. And then we'll talk about how do we know when they're done and what to do with them after. So I'm going to take one of these beautiful blushes. This one I don't even need to core because it has such a tiny core. Just going to slice them up to about 1/4 inch thick. You notice it's very pulpy. There's not a lot of water dripping out. Just going to do a couple to show you. Do this nice plum. This one I will take the core out. Slice it up. About 1/4 inch. Okay, just to give you the idea. Here's my tray. And I would just fill the tray. Now, if I was doing 2 different types like this, I would probably do a separate tray for each type so that I could keep tabs on the progress of each type. So that's really basically all we would do. Fill as many trays as you have produce, put them on, the lid goes on, and I would, my book recommended using a moderate heat setting, so my middle heat setting. While I'm on that topic, you definitely want to follow the guidelines that are in your manual that came with your dehydrator, because that's going to give you the most accurate advice about your particular model, because as I said, they have very different features. Your fan strength may be different, the wattage, all those things. So read your manual and follow the guidelines for particular fruits and vegetables parameters as a start. So how do we know when they're done? Now, this is real. Oh, the other thing too is you may need to rotate your tray. So you notice I put these up here on the top tray just because it was easy. But if I had a full batch and I had every tray, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trays. The fan is closest to the bottom in my unit. So those that are right above the fan are going to have the most airflow around them. So you may need to rotate your trays. You may need to take the top tray, a few hours in, bring it to the bottom, and rotate the rest up periodically through the drying time. Because it could take 12 to 24 or more hours to get the tomatoes to the point that are the ideal dehydration point. So getting back to what I was beginning to say, how do we know when they're done? For tomatoes, we're shooting for pliable, barely pliable. I wish I had a zoom camera so you could see. Barely pliable. It's hard to get them to be really crispy. You would have to really dehydrate them much longer, and they don't need to be. But you don't want to see any visible wetness. Leathery is a good word. A little bit bendable and leathery. And what you will do is, as you're checking your batch, the ones that seem to be ready, you will take out, put into an airtight jar or an airtight freezer bag. And you'll check them periodically. If they start to resorb water, then they need to go back into the dehydrator. So you're going to be looking at them. Some will dry faster than others. Some of mine, this one got very crisp. just keep an eye on them, and that's even a good point to make even after storage. If you're storing them at room temperature in an airtight jar, you do want to take a look at them, because if you open and close the jar frequently and you have humid air, it's possible that they could start to resorb a little bit of water. And if that does happen, you always have the option of storing them either in the fridge, in the jar, that will slow that down, or even freezing them. I have frozen batches of dehydrated tomatoes just for longer storage. And again, if they're properly dehydrated, you can store them for months in a jar if you're checking periodically just to make sure that they're not getting moist for any reason, or even longer in the freezer. So what to do with the finished products? I have a jar of 50 at least beautiful dehydrated mini tomatoes. Now what? Well, first of all, when I open the jar, they do smell heavenly. They have that almost sun-dried tomato smell. Really nice fragrance. And it's really easy to rehydrate them. All you need to do is soak them in either a little warm water or a little warm broth. Or, probably the easiest way, if you're putting them into a soup or stew, they can go right into the liquid. There's plenty of liquid to rehydrate them. But again, you can use them soups, stews, stir fries, pizza toppings. I really like them rehydrated on pizza. You can chop them up, put them into eggs or omelets. You can chop them up and put them into savory bread recipes. And there's one recipe that I'm going to be trying, which is to actually make a tomato powder that you can use if you want a little tomato flavor, but not necessarily want to put in something as strong flavored as tomato paste or tomato sauce. So I need to have them very dry for that so that I can pulverize them in a food processor, and then they become a tomato powder. So I may be experimenting with that, and if I have a good product, I will definitely post that up on my Hunterdon County website. So where can you go for more information about dehydrating in general? There's a very, very good source that we use for home food preservation. That's the National Center for Home Food Preservation at the University of Georgia. And I will try to get that link into the Facebook Live at the end of the broadcast, or definitely we have resources on the Hunterdon County Cooperative Extension page and on our state Family and Community Health Sciences page under food safety. So I'll try to post those links later on, and you can always email me if you have questions, grency@njaes.rutgers.edu. So I hope the introduction to dehydrating tomatoes was helpful. And if you're like me and you don't want to let go of summer bounty too quickly, you may consider trying your hand at dehydrating tomatoes and even other summer vegetables. So, hope to see you at another Facebook Live. Take care and enjoy your garden bounty.